You're told to want more, to become more, to never stop moving. That if you just push hard enough, fast enough, long enough, you'll reach it. That distant place where it all finally makes sense. Success, enlightenment, inner peace, purpose. Whatever name they gave the finish line, the map always looked the same. Hustle, sacrifice, compete, optimize. But here's the problem. You've been running for years, and the finish line never arrived. In fact, the faster you ran, the further it seemed to drift. You thought you were chasing a goal. But what if you were just circling a track? A treadmill disguised as transcendence. Look around. In the age of hyperproductivity, burnout is a badge of honor. In the age of infinite information, meaning feels harder than ever to grasp. People have more options, more tools, more metrics for success, and yet depression, anxiety, and alienation are quietly becoming the dominant emotions of modern life. How can that be? This is where the contradiction begins. The more obsessed we become with winning, the more hollow we begin to feel. It's not a failure of effort. It's a failure of definition. We've mistaken motion for meaning. We've confused momentum with direction, and we've forgotten to ask a simple but terrifying question: what are we actually chasing? Philosophers across time warned us about this illusion. The Buddhists spoke of tanha, craving, grasping, clinging, as the root of suffering. The Stoics taught that peace lies not in what happens, but how you respond. And modern psychology calls it the hedonic treadmill. The observed truth that no matter how much we achieve, we return to a baseline of dissatisfaction. In other words, we adapt. Fast. That promotion, that house, that ideal body. The moment you attain it, your mind recalibrates. What was once a dream becomes the new normal, and a new, shinier goal takes its place. You're never allowed to rest. Not because you haven't earned it, but because the game was never designed to let you win. We idolize progress, but few stop to define where it's going. Growth is assumed to be good, but growth for what? Even cancer grows. Even a storm gathers momentum. In the absence of conscious direction, more isn't just meaningless, it can be dangerous. The myth of Sisyphus speaks to this perfectly. Condemned. To push a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only to watch it roll back down, and we think, what a tragedy. But what if that myth isn't so ancient after all? What if millions of people today are doing the same, pushing toward titles, goals, personas, images, only to wake up feeling more disconnected than ever? You see it in the stories people tell once they make it. The entrepreneur who builds the empire but feels nothing. The artist who goes viral, then spirals. The athlete who wins gold but falls into depression the next day. These aren't anomalies. They're symptoms, because when your identity is built on reaching the next thing, you lose everything the moment you arrive. We've internalized the lie that we must earn our worth. That value is external, conditional, performative. That we are not enough until we win, and that winning must always look like more status, more money, more attention. But what happens when we reach that summit and still feel empty? The culture offers a solution: climb another one. But maybe the problem isn't the summit. Maybe the problem is the mountain itself. What if the real trap isn't failure, but endless striving? This is the hunger that never ends. A hunger that grows not because you're starving, but because you were taught to ignore the taste of what you already have. A hunger that confuses sensation with fulfillment. A hunger that confuses escape with evolution. We've come to believe that fulfillment lies somewhere outside the present moment. That if we could just do more, achieve more, become more, then we'll finally be okay. But maybe the opposite is true. Maybe peace begins the moment you stop chasing what's already within reach. Still, the question lingers, haunts even. If winning doesn't satisfy you, was it really your definition of winning in the first place? What if the reason you can't win is because you never defined what winning actually means? You weren't born needing likes, but somewhere along the way, you forgot how to live without them. Before you ever asked who you were taught to ask who you should be. What's praised is repeated. What's rewarded becomes the compass. The more they clapped, the more you learn to perform. Not to express, but to conform. This is the quiet exchange no one notices. Trading authenticity for applause. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's death by 1,000 validations. You start with a sense of self, raw, unfiltered, and strange. Then come the grades, the stars, the punishments and prizes. You learn to trim your edges. You learn to speak in scripts. You learn that being right is safer than being real. Over time, the applause becomes addictive. It starts to feel like oxygen. You chase it like a breath. Not because it satisfies, but because the silence feels like death. This is what Erich Fromm called the shift from being to having. In a society built on measurement, worth becomes a number. You don't just feel joy, you have followers. You don't just explore, you have credentials. You don't just exist, you have a brand. Even your soul is converted into metrics, and somewhere in that process, you forget who you were without the mirror. We're told that this is freedom, that the stage is open to everyone now, that anyone can win. But if your value is defined by clicks, curated applause, or algorithmic approval, are you expressing anything at all, or are you just echoing what's already popular? This is where ambition quietly rots from the inside. Ancient Rome understood this well. The gladiators fought not just for victory, but for cheers. For survival, yes, but also for spectacle. And the masses were given bread and circuses to keep them pacified. Applause in this context was never about truth. It was a tool of control. Now, the arena is digital, the blood is metaphorical, but the structure remains. Hustle culture tells you to grind until you bleed and then smile for the camera. Influencer culture trains you to package your identity into digestible dopamine hits. You're told this is empowerment. But what if it's just a prettier cage? Because when the crowd decides your worth, you're always one silence away from disappearing. This is the tragedy of interjected identity, when who you are is filtered through what others want. It starts with needing to be seen, but it ends with forgetting how to be alone. You build yourself for applause, and in doing so, outsource your selfhood. And the irony? Clapping never means you're free. It means you've become good at what they reward. Like a stage actor under blinding lights, you smile. You hit your marks. You say the lines. But the audience can't see the chains around your ankles, the ones you stopped feeling long ago. What makes this prison so effective is that it feels like progress. It feels like winning. But if your achievements require constant validation, you'll spend your life proving, not living. So the question becomes more urgent. Who is writing your script? Who told you what winning means? Who taught you to seek applause instead of inner peace? Who benefits when your self-worth rises and falls with their attention? And most importantly, what happens if the clapping stops? Because sooner or later, it always does. If applause defines you, then silence becomes your greatest fear. But maybe that's where the truth begins, in the moment you choose to step off the stage and listen for a voice that isn't trying to please anyone. Before you ever chose a goal, someone handed you a script. Before you formed an identity, you were assigned one. From the moment you could walk, there were labels waiting. Good boy, smart girl, future leader, obedient student. You didn't create these roles, you inherited them. And you performed? Because performance was safe. It was love. It was survival. But over time, something strange happens. The performance becomes habitual. The mask fits too well. And one day, you forget where the role ends. And where you begin. This is how most people lose themselves, not in failure, but in success. You can win every role and still lose your soul. Because it's possible to spend your entire life becoming exactly what others wanted and never. Once asked if you wanted it too. Carl Jung warned of the persona, the social mask we craft to function in the world. Necessary, yes, but dangerous when mistaken for the whole self. Beneath it lies the shadow, all the parts of us we were told to reject, repress, or hide. The feelings that didn't fit the role, the questions that made others uncomfortable, the desires that weren't marketable. And yet, the shadow never vanishes. It waits. And when it's ignored too long, it begins to erode from within in anxiety, self-sabotage, or existential dread. Søren Kierkegaard called it despair. Not loud, theatrical despair, but the quiet, invisible kind. The despair of not being yourself, of climbing the ladder only to realize it was leaned against the wrong wall. This isn't just a personal issue. It's systemic. School teaches obedience before curiosity. Work rewards compliance over creativity. Social media promotes image over depth. The world pushes you into a mold, then calls you successful for fitting into it. But success built on conformity is fragile. It requires constant maintenance. You become what the world needs you to be, and in doing so, bury what you were born to become. Ancient Greek theater understood this duality. The word persona literally meant mask. Actors wore them to signal identity, but everyone knew the face behind it wasn't real. Today, the distinction is harder to see. We fuse the mask with the skin. Confucian philosophy once emphasized role ethics, knowing your place as a parent, a child, a citizen. It offered an order. But in modern life, where roles constantly shift and identities fragment, we're left unmoored. We swap masks faster, but still forget to ask, who is behind them? You're told to be the winner, the good son, the strong man, the ambitious woman, the woke individual, the productive citizen. These roles are praised. But what happens when you no longer recognize the person behind them? Some spend their lives optimizing the mask, polishing the performance, chasing applause for a character they didn't audition for. And then one day, the lights go out, the crowd disappears, and silence creeps in. This is the moment of rupture, the terrifying realization that the version of you that everyone loved might not be you at all. You feel it in the quiet moments, in the pause between goals, in the silence after success. That flicker of doubt, that whisper of confusion. Whose dream am I chasing? Whose values am I living? Who am I without the chase? Most ignore that voice, because listening means dismantling a life built on performance, but ignoring it comes at a cost. You remain celebrated and unseen, because even the most admired mask is still a mask. And until you face what lies beneath it, not what's filtered, not what's praised, but what's real, you will remain a stranger to your own life. The chase can make you feel alive. But when the finish line keeps moving and the applause begins to fade, the only question left is this: I don't know who I am without the chase. What if winning only exists because someone else is losing? It's a question that cracks the surface of everything we've been taught, because we're told life is a meritocracy, that success is earned, that rewards reflect effort, and that anyone can win if they just want it badly enough. But what if the game isn't fair? Worse, what if it's rigged to keep you running? To understand this, we have to confront a brutal truth. Most modern systems are not built to make you feel whole. They are built to make you feel almost whole, just close enough to hope, but never close enough to rest. This is not accidental. It's design. Foucault once described modern societies not as cages of iron, but as invisible systems of discipline, structures that shape behavior without the need for force. Schools, hospitals, prisons, corporations, each with rules, surveillance, expectations. And the most effective control isn't punishment. It's self-regulation. Internalized standards. A mind that polices itself. And what better way to keep people in line than by promising they can win someday? This is where the myth of meritocracy becomes so powerful and so dangerous. It suggests that all failure is personal and all success is deserved. But if we examine history, we see a different story. Feudal systems once tied value to birthright. You were born a peasant or a lord, and that was that. Today, the script has changed, but the effect is hauntingly similar. Now you're told you're free, but in practice, you still live within invisible walls. Capitalism, for all its innovation, depends on scarcity, not just of goods, but of meaning, worth, and time. There's never enough money, status, beauty, productivity. There's always someone faster, richer, more polished. The system survives by keeping you unsatisfied. It needs you to believe you're one step behind. Always. Social media amplifies this illusion. The algorithm feeds you curated highlights, engineered envy, and carefully crafted identities. Everyone looks like they're winning, except you. And so you scroll more, spend more, compare more, not realizing the comparison is the point. Behavioral economists call this loss aversion, the tendency to fear losing more than we value gaining. It's why scarcity sells. It's why countdown timers exist. It's why status is never static. Because if you're afraid to fall behind, you'll do whatever it takes to stay ahead, even if it means playing a game that's slowly consuming you. Chomsky warned of manufactured consent, the way media shapes public opinion not by lies, but by controlling the framework of thought. You're not told what to think. You're told what to think about. You're told what matters, what success looks like, what failure feels like. And you're told that the only way out is to play harder, faster, better. But here's the paradox. If the rules are written to keep you striving, then even when you win, you lose. This is the system that needs you to lose, not catastrophically, but incrementally, in ways that look like progress. Promotions that come with deeper exhaustion. Validation that feels more like dependence. Freedom that comes wrapped in new obligations. We see echoes of this in myth. Prometheus steals fire, the symbol of knowledge, power, liberation. And for that act of rebellion, he is punished eternally. His crime wasn't destruction, it was disobedience. He stopped playing the role. And that's the secret most systems guard, not through violence, but through rhythm, through repetition, through routines that keep you too tired to question, too distracted to rebel. Because once you see the game for what it is, you might stop playing. You might ask why winning always feels like running. Why rest feels like guilt. Why meaning is always somewhere else. You might realize that the prize isn't real, that it flickers like a mirage every time you get close, that the maze was never meant to be solved, only followed, and you might begin to suspect that unthinkable, that the system doesn't want you to arrive. It wants you to chase. So if the system profits from your striving, what happens if you stop playing the game? What if the most powerful victory is the one no one sees? We live in a culture obsessed with spectacle, where success must be public, shareable, measurable. But the more we tie victory to visibility, the more invisible we become to ourselves. At some point, the question changes. It's no longer, how do I win? It becomes, why am I still chasing? That's when the breakthrough happens. Not in the noise, but in the silence that follows collapse. When the game no longer makes sense and the scoreboard feels irrelevant, something quiet begins to grow. It doesn't look like conquest. It looks like clarity. A monk sits cross-legged, smiling as the crowd mocks him. Not because he's won their approval, but because he no longer needs it. A man walks away from the throne everyone else is still fighting over. He doesn't argue. He doesn't justify. He simply turns and leaves because he knows the price of sitting on that throne is his soul. A woman tears up the resume she spent a decade perfecting and plants a tree instead, not because it's strategic, but because it feels honest. Because for the first time, she isn't optimizing for approval. She's listening to what matters. These are quiet victories, the ones that don't trend, that don't scale, that don't sparkle under lights. But they are victories all the same. They mark the moment someone stops performing and starts living. The Stoics called it ataraxia, inner calm, untouched by chaos. The Taoists called it wu wei, action without force, purpose without strain. Viktor Frankl, after surviving the Holocaust, wrote that the one freedom no one can take from you is the ability to choose your response, even in suffering, especially in suffering. This is the win that can't be taken, because it doesn't come from out there. It comes from within, from alignment, from integrity, from the radical act of being yourself in a world that profits. From your doubt. In Greek philosophy, it's called Eudaimonia, not happiness as a fleeting high, but flourishing. Living in accordance with your nature. It's not about constant pleasure. It's about enduring meaning. It's not about comfort. It's about coherence. Because what if real power isn't domination, but discernment? What if freedom isn't having everything, but needing less? What if strength isn't how much you control, but how little you need to? This is where the chase ends, not with a medal, not with applause, but with stillness. With the kind of peace that doesn't require justification. With a breath that isn't about performance, but presence. You don't have to abandon ambition, but you can redefine it. You can choose to pursue what aligns instead of what impresses. You can choose to build a life that feels good when no one's watching. Because the ultimate win is not that they believe in you. It's that you no longer need them to. So now the question changes one final time. What would your life look like if you didn't have to prove anything anymore? It began with a contradiction. The harder you chased success, the further it slipped away. The faster you ran, the less progress you seemed to make. The more you played by the rules, the more the rules seemed to change. But what if the problem wasn't you? What if you were never losing? Because you were never meant to win? You were born into a game already in motion. The goals were decided long before you arrived. Wealth, status, prestige, productivity. But you never asked who built the board, who set the rules, or who benefits when you compete. Now, for the first time, you see the architecture beneath the illusion. The race was circular. The masks were paper-thin. The applause was conditional. The system worked, not because it was true, but because you believed in it. And now, you down single quotes T. This is where the game begins to unravel. You were taught that value must be earned, that peace must be delayed, that worth must be proven. But what if that was never true? What if all the suffering wasn't a failure to win, but the result of playing a game that was never yours to begin with? In Zen philosophy, there are riddles that have no answer, koans designed not to solve, but to dissolve the illusion of the question itself. One monk is asked, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Another replies, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him." These are not instructions. They are awakenings, reminders that truth does not always live in answers. Sometimes it lives in the refusal to keep asking the wrong questions. Samuel Beckett once wrote Waiting for Godot, A play where two men wait endlessly for someone who never arrives. They fill their days with rituals, distractions, pointless arguments. The audience watches, restless, hoping for a resolution that never comes. But that's the point. Sometimes the absurdity is the message. Sometimes freedom begins when you stop waiting for something that was never coming. And maybe that's the secret you were never meant to know. You can stop playing. You can stop proving. You can stop running. You can sit in the center of the chaos and choose silence. You can let the applause fade. You can take off the mask. You can walk out of the maze, not because you solved it, but because you saw it for what it was, a beautiful, elaborate trap. You don't need to win the game. You just need to stop believing in it. This is what liberation looks like. Not conquest, not escape, but clarity. The quiet power of choosing your own definition. The radical act of being content without needing permission. The race will go on around you. The world will keep spinning its illusions, but you no longer belong to it. You've remembered something that was always true, but buried. You already are enough. You always were. So what else is there to win? What if the final form of winning is letting go, not in surrender, not in weakness, but in strength so deep it no longer needs to hold on? You spend years clinging to identity, ambition, narratives about who you should be. You grip so tightly, believing that if you let go, everything will fall apart. But sometimes it's the holding on that's doing the damage. Sometimes the peace you're looking for is waiting on the other side of release. This isn't the kind of victory you were taught to admire. It doesn't look like a finish line or a trophy. It doesn't sparkle in the eyes of the world. It hums quietly in the chest, a stillness that doesn't need to prove anything. Lao Tzu wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." In the Tao Te Ching, power flows not from resistance, but from surrender, from aligning with what is instead of constantly chasing what should be. Water carves stone not through force, but through patience, through persistence, through the art of non-striving. This is what letting go really means, not apathy, not indifference, but trust that your worth is not at stake in every performance, that your value does not vanish when the applause fades, that being present is more profound than being impressive, and maybe, somewhere along the way, you begin to realize you don't have to chase your reflection to be real. You don't have to win to be worthy. You don't have to know everything to be wise. There's a poem by Rumi. He writes, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you." It's a reminder that life is not a ladder or a race, but a rhythm. And when you stop fighting its flow, you don't become smaller. You become free. Because letting go isn't the end of ambition. It's the beginning of a deeper kind, the ambition to be whole, to be awake, to live without needing a scoreboard. A clenched fist can only grasp, but an open hand can hold, can give, can receive. There is wisdom in emptiness, strength in softness, victory in vulnerability. A child laughs without reason. They are not optimizing. They are not performing. They are not curating their joy for an audience. They are simply being. And somehow, in that simplicity, they are more alive than most adults ever allow themselves to be. The world will tell you to keep climbing, to outdo, outshine, outwork. But what it rarely tells you is that you're allowed to stop. You're allowed to exhale. You're allowed to live at the speed of breath, not deadlines. You are allowed to let go of who you were supposed to be in order to become who you are. This is not resignation. It's a revolution, a quiet one, because in a culture built on striving, peace is rebellion, presence is power, and letting go is the most unshakable kind of winning there is. You have nothing left to prove. The war was never outside. It was always the battle within. And now, maybe for the first time, you realize you don't have to win it. You only have to stop fighting yourself. And that is enough.